Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Good Friday morning to you. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, or wherever you podcast. Senator David Lucas yesterday gave it a valiant effort. I'm going to read to you real quick from the AJC's article that dropped last night. A last-ditch effort to expand Medicaid in Georgia had life until it didn't. Greg Bluestein, Michelle Baruchman at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting that a Republican-led Georgia Senate committee narrowly voted Thursday to kill a last-minute measure brought by Democrats to significantly expand Georgia's Medicaid program. It fell by a 7-7 vote, y'all. The surprise measure, House Bill 1077, was defeated by a coalition of Republicans who said they want to give Brian Kemp's more limited expansion more time to generate support after a suspenseful debate. The Senate Regulated Industries Committee deadlocked 7-7 over the proposal, with Republican Senators Matt Brass and Cardin Summers joining the Democrats to vote in favor. The proposal would have empowered the state to seek a federal waiver so Georgia could purchase private health insurance plans for people in the state who are above the poverty line but still can't afford to buy their own insurance plans through the Affordable Care Act. It was modeled after the private option plan adopted recently, by the way, in Arkansas. Arkansas is ahead of us on this, y'all. Republican lawmakers stood behind Kemp, who last year launched an alternative to fully expanding Medicaid, the state federal health care program for the poor and disabled, known as Georgia Pathways. Governor Brian Kemp's own aides said that he lobbied lawmakers to oppose the measure, which had a roughly $580 million price tag. Let's go inside that subcommittee hearing yesterday, where Senator David Lucas is the gentleman who brought that measure to the committee to a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like for Laura Colbert and Russ Harris to join me, because
that'd be just fine. We are working off of a committee substitute prepared by you or on your behalf to HB 1077. It's LC 52055-7S.
First of all, I want everybody to know, and I want to thank the chairman. This is not an I bill. This is a USM bill. USM, as my grandmama would say. We started out on this conversation about Medicaid expansion and CON need to travel together. There were some things in CON, and for 49 years I've been here, the CON really has never been pierced. No major changes to CON. What I'd like to do is talk about Medicaid expansion. This act shall be known as the Peach Care Plus Act of 2024. Findings. The legislature finds that expanding access to coverage for essential health care needs to Georgians earning up to 138% of the federal poverty level will improve the quality and availability of health care services in this state. It is important that federal reimbursement remain at current rates to allow the state of Georgia to provide such coverage. Providing coverage via fully subsidized commercial insurance products on the section of 1332 Marketplace in Georgia will give individuals more options in coverage and help to ensure that health care providers may commercially contract for the services and receive fair reimbursement for providing such services. Adoption of a joint resolution of the General Assembly. This section shall not apply to a waiver application with associated amendments submitted and approved pursuant to this act prior to October 31st, 2025. Authorization form of expansion. The department shall, in consultation with the Office of Insurance and Safety Commissioner, submit a waiver request for approval along with other necessary amendments on or before October 31st, 2025 to the United States Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services pursuant to Section 1115 of the Federal Social Security Act, which shall include the following. Enrollment for certain low-income individuals making less than 130% of the federal poverty level in the eligibility category created by Section 1902A 10AI 8 of the Social Security 20 Security Act for 42, and that's federal code, 42 USC 1396A into qualified health plans offered on the state marketplace. Established under 1332 of the Affordable Care Act or the federal marketplace as applicable at implementation. Full payment of any premiums or other direct costs associated with enrolling in qualified health plans for certain individuals making less than 138% of the poverty level. The provision of this section shall only apply so long as the state federal medical assistance percentage for the state established pursuant to 42 USC 1396D for a population covered by waiver remains at or above 90%. It is the intent of the General Assembly that all savings to the state as a result of this act shall be deposited into the Indigent Care Trust Fund for program expenses described herein. Payment of such funds to agencies of this state as may be required to pay any additional state costs associated with the Peach Care Plus program. The program created by this act shall be a program of the Department of Community Health and named the Peach Care Plus program. If the waiver as described in this section is not substantially approved by CMS before April 30, 2025, then the provisions of Section 5 of this act shall become effective. Fallback plan. An individual is eligible for coverage of health care services, medical assistance provided pursuant to this article if the individual meets the requirements of 42 U.S.C. Section 1396A 10A I8. We're talking about putting up an advisory council that would deal with this. This has created the Advisory Commission on Peach Care Plus, which shall advise the department in drafting, submitting, and implementing the waiver provided for in this act, which shall consist of the following members. The Commissioner of the Department of Community Health or a designee who will also serve as chair. 3 members of the majority party in the Georgia Senate appointed by the President of the Senate. 2 members of the minority party in the Georgia Senate appointed by the President of the Senate. 3 members of the majority party in the Georgia House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House. 2 members of the minority party in the Georgia House of Representatives appointed by the Speaker of the House. The Commission consult with the Department during preparation of the waiver requests authorized by this Act and review such waiver prior to submission. Issue a public report no less than 30 days after submission of the waiver making recommendations for implementation and success of the program authorized by the waiver. Seek to make all recommendations in a bipartisan manner, with the chair only voting on any recommendation in the event of a tie. Receive for legislative members the same per diem expenses allowance as that received by members of the General Assembly for 5 days of study and review of this topic, and for each day member is in attendance at a meeting of the Commission. Remain in place on ongoing basis with members serving at the pleasure of the state, official appointing them to advise the fund created by this act on its ongoing. Now, Mr. Chairman, we introduced 487, which was the Medicaid expansion bill. Mm-hmm. That bill had a work program in it.
That's a bill you filed that got assigned to our health committee.
Right.
This committee has not heard that.
That's right.
Okay.
And what happened over the time, as I was walking down the hall the other day, Senator Brass came up to me And he said, Luke, you can't put a work component in it. The courts have ruled that it is insurance and not a work program. And so what we discussed and what I discussed with Senator Brass.
Let's be careful talking about private conversations between senators.
Well, you know,
okay. He may share those. That helps us have candid conversations.
Right.
Have them remain confidential.
What he said to me, he said, Luke, the courts have ruled you can't put.
He's waived attorney-client privilege. He's waived. Yeah. He's waived legislative privilege. You go right ahead.
I'm not an attorney, so I can't be disbarred. What he said is you can't put work into your bill because they've all been turned down by CMS, and the courts ruled that it is an insurance program and not a work program. What we discussed is the North Carolina plan included workforce development because our job is to go out and try to get folks and put them in a position to go to work at various places. So I agree with him that it need to be amended because they approved the North Carolina plan with workforce development in it. Mm-hmm. As we talk, you and I talk, and excuse me again, we talked about the two need to travel together. There were some things that we need to do on CON to help rural Georgia.
Certificate of need. And
we in the Senate passed the CON bill to do exactly that. One of the things that happened is if a OBGYN wanted to set up an office with a pediatrician and it was not at the hospital, they had to get a CON, which is ridiculous when we talk about infant mortality. Who gonna see about the children when you get them delivered?
Right.
The pediatrician. The hospital in Colquitt County closed and they wanted to reopen. And they told them 24 months to 18 months before they have a hearing based on CON. And what we did in the Senate was to try to take care of that particular situation. There has been a problem with CON, especially when you're talking about a hospital being built within 35 miles of another hospital. Back during the day, what CON was doing was those not-for-profit hospitals who took in everybody to keep those hospitals that made money and that would cherry pick the patients that had insurance. That's good. Today, competition is good. What kind of service you provide. As a football player, I had to compete. If I didn't, I was on the bench, I wasn't on the football team. So every day when you go to practice, you had to compete. So I think competing is a good thing. It opens up the door to many things in healthcare. Finally, I want to talk about COVID taught us an experience. Had we had those 12 rural hospitals that closed, our death rate might not have been as high in Georgia. To give you an example, I had a buddy of mine that lived in Hancock County. I tried to get him a bed. All the beds were full in Augusta and everywhere. He left and had to go to Pensacola, Florida to get a bed. He died there, not having family around. We have an opportunity in Georgia to try to see about Georgians in healthcare. Everybody wants to live a long life. I want to live as long as Methuselah, but I don't know how I'm gonna make it without healthcare.
Right, exactly.
And so I bring to the Senate the opportunity to have the Medicaid expansion discussed between the House and the Senate. How much money it costs, what kind of plan you're gonna use, what are gonna be the rules in getting health care in Georgia. rural hospitals have a problem, bed occupancy.
Right.
And when they take in folks who can't pay, it's called uncompensated care. Now, I've talked to, where the hell go again? I've been talking to everybody across the aisle to help me do this. Senator Burns talked to me.
Somewhat.
We talk.
You're not going to have many senators left willing to talk to you if you keep telling everything they say. That's the reason for that professionalism between us.
But the conversation was good. Burns knew more about hospitals. He served on the boards and uncompensated care. He told me, look, if you can't pay the bill, the county is trying to get up the money to keep the hospital open, as well as to make sure those folks who work at the hospital have a job, and also to see about their health care. In talking to you and the lieutenant governor, talking to somebody, it's about telling the truth. This ain't no Democratic thing. This is us.
They are squirming.
All of us, because it takes Republicans as well as Democrats to try to work this deal out, so that we can see about health care in Georgia. Now, with that, any of the specifics that you want to know, I have Ross Harris and Ms. Colbert here, because they helped me try to put this together. I am not a lawyer. I'm a street lawyer. I learned everything from the street. And so what I say to you all is, we can't kick the can down the road anymore.
Yes.
1.2 billion is in D.C.
That's right.
Waiting for Georgia.
That part. Listen.
To expand.
That's right.
But how long will it be there? Mississippi did it 2 weeks ago. You don't think that those folks in Congress are not looking at that 1.2 billion and say, well, y'all are not using it, and so we want to get it. And what we have to understand, when we give departments in the state of Georgia money and they don't use it, we go back and we recoup it.
That's right.
And do other things with it. And with that, for those of you who have any questions, I'd like for you to go ahead and ask me about it now, because I got the folks can talk better about it than I.
So we'll get to some of those questions and answers when the Ron Show returns in minutes on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. And by the way, let me just apologize for having you listen to the wonkiness of Senator David Lucas explaining the Peach Care Plus provision that he sought to get passed through the Rules Committee in the Georgia Senate yesterday, which essentially was going to expand Medicaid in a similar fashion to what had happened in the state of Arkansas. Unfortunately, I have been putting today's show together pretty much on the fly, minutes before it airs. This is not live, by the way. I do pre-record the morning of. We air 9 to 10 a.m. on America One Radio, and then replays 5 to 6, goes on demand at progressivevoices.com. I want you to hear from today's Politically Georgia blog this notion of betrayal, because Democrats under the Gold Dome believe that they had a deal worked out to get this pushed through. Reading from this blog, again, Greg Bluestein, Michelle Baruchman reporting in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the vote came days after Senate Democrats threatened to vote en masse against a prized health priority of Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, a pending rollback of hospital regulations, the certificate of need that you kept hearing David Lucas, the CON, referring to. If they can't win promises to broader health care access to hundreds of thousands of Georgians, Democrats were going to vote against that priority. And remember, in fact, we'll talk about this in the next segment, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones' father stands to gain from this in their home county of Butts County, because guess who wants to build a hospital in Butts County? Lieutenant Governor's dad. Anyway, Senate Minority Leader Gloria Butler said she thought she had struck a deal with Senate Republicans to vote the expansion bill out of the Senate in exchange for Democratic support to scale back hospital regulations. Unfortunately, they got hoodooed by Senator Bill Cowsert. This is me talking, not Bluestein and Baruchman. Cowsert, however, said he had only promised to hold a vote in his committee and made no apologies for the arrival of GOP State Senator Ben Watson, who got swapped in. He's not normally a member of the committee, according to Baruchman and Bluestein. Not normally a member of the committee, and cast a key no vote against the bill, saying it needed more time to mature. Democrats have said that opening new hospitals without expanding Medicaid, especially in rural areas, would further weaken hospitals because it would force them to compete for healthcare workers and patients. We already have a shortage, y'all. We already have a shortage of healthcare workers in this state. And we're going to open new hospitals without the funding to ensure that they can compete for the employees, maybe bring some in from other parts of the country. Back to Bluestein and Baruchman's writing. And it surfaced weeks after House Speaker John Burns effectively tabled the discussion of expansion in his chamber until next year by proposing a commission to study the issue. Looking at my clock, I'm up against a hard break on America One Radio. Those of you listening via podcast, stand by. Just a quick pause when we return to this discussion. On The Ron Show, thank you for listening.
Follow The Ron Show on Facebook at The Ron Show Radio. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
So I readily accept that most Americans, most Georgians, really don't want to see how the sausage is made. And I don't mean that from a butcher shop perspective. I mean that from seeing how legislation does or doesn't work, doesn't come through. It's kind of boring. It's kind of mundane. There aren't many of us who can sit here and watch the Georgia House of Representatives or Georgia Senate or their various committees on the YouTube channel, let alone in person, with a whole lot of interest and zeal. I mean, my first segment today was David Lucas going off for about 3.5-4 minutes reading the paragraph B, subsection C, I, 1B. Oh, my God. It's complex, no doubt about it. But I think listening to some of the inner mechanisms of how bills and amendments are quietly agreed upon. You heard David Lucas talking about private conversations, and you heard as some of those Senate Republicans were squirming in their seats, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't go talking about private conversations here on a public forum because then it goes on the record. Oh, heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. Senator Gloria Butler, again, reading back in the AJC political article about this Medicaid expansion last-ditch effort that failed, said she thought she had struck a deal with Senate Republicans to vote the expansion bill out of the Senate in exchange for Democratic support to scale back hospital regulations that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones would benefit from greatly. Well, his father anyway. Same difference. Bill Cowsert, however, said he had only promised to hold a vote in his committee and made no apologies for the arrival. He swapped out a vote. He swapped out a senator, GOP State Senator Ben Watson, who isn't normally a member of the committee, and cast a key vote no against the bill, saying it needed more time to, what did he say? Mature, he said. And I'm going to repeat this line that we spoke about in the last segment. Democrats have said that opening new hospitals without expanding Medicaid, especially in rural areas, would further weaken hospitals because it would force them to compete for healthcare workers. Oh, and patients, but definitely the workers. What good is it to go to a hospital if you don't have the workers there to work? John Burns effectively tabled the measure for a year. Let's just discuss it, review it, committee, blah, blah, blah. Republicans centered on their support for Kemp's Pathways to Coverage, which we all know is just an expensive failure. $26 million spent. 3,500 of 370,000 potential Georgians have signed up. That's, and 90% of that money, 90% of the $26 million, toward administrative and consulting costs. Brian Kemp still is opposed to full expansion for Medicaid. He says it's too costly and inflexible. His people said it was going to cost $580 million to roll out this measure, House Bill 1077, that David Lucas brought to the Senate Committee on Rules yesterday. But there's $1.2 billion in federal money sitting there waiting that was carved out. Senators Ossoff and Warnock worked that out. Had $1.2 billion waiting to be used for this Medicaid expansion. Now, as Greg Bluestein and Sarah Baruchman point out in their article about this, Kemp notably hasn't publicly threatened to block or veto legislation to fully expand Medicaid if Republican lawmakers embrace the idea. He made clear in a recent interview, though, that he was, quote, never in favor of doing that last year or this year. Even with broader support, HB 1077 would have faced long odds of passing in 2024. The 40-day session ends next week, and rank-and-file Republicans who have long campaigned against Medicaid expansion would need to swiftly recalibrate their positions. Still, some conservatives signaled a strategic shift. Senator Brass, one of the chamber's most influential Republicans, I believe David Lucas invoked his name in a private conversation, so he was probably one of those squirming, said that, quote, massive inflation has made it more difficult for struggling Georgians to qualify for Kemp's program. Before voting for the expansion, he said he worries about employees at his business who need more health care access, saying, sometimes roofs leak. Pointing to the fact that, unexpected costs can strain a household's finances. So we were listening in on the conversation inside the Senate rules, and this gives us a little bit more background on what this bill was designed to do.
So thank you all for having me here this morning. I'm Laura Colbert with Georgians for a Healthy Future, and we are a health policy organization representing Georgians here across the state. So this bill really lays out the authorization for our Georgia Department of Community Health to work with CMS, our federal government, to seek permission for a waiver program that would extend health insurance to adults making less than 138% of the federal poverty line. And the way that health insurance would be secured is that the Department of Community Health would purchase private health insurance plans, just like those sold on the Georgia Access Marketplace, on the governor's marketplace. And so folks would get private health insurance, and those costs would be covered by the Department of Community Health. There's an advisory group that would be set up to kind of help advise and recommend about how this waiver should be put together and implemented. And there is a time frame established for ensuring that this waiver is submitted and approved by October 2025 of next year.
So this is not a full Medicaid expansion. It's similar to the Governor's Pathways program.
It would go beyond the Governor's Pathways program, so it would extend coverage to individuals up to 138% of the federal poverty line. Pathways stops at the poverty line.
The advantage of doing it using private insurance, as you suggest, is that it gives a higher reimbursement rate to the medical providers.
Exactly.
Higher than Medicaid.
Yes.
So it's better than Medicaid expansion to use a waiver of some type.
It depends on what problems you're trying to solve for the state, but it can be advantageous in that way.
You're doing something similar to what the governor has done, but more aggressive.
Exactly. Yeah. And
why shouldn't we give him a chance? Why shouldn't we give the governor a chance to see if Pathways can succeed before you cut his legs out from under him? He is working hard. COVID stalled it, as Senator Lucas said, and it has not gotten the traction once. But now that we're beyond COVID, trying to get further approval, I can't remember the procedural problems, the granting of the waiver, the yanking it back, and all the politics involved in that. I am curious why it wouldn't be wise to give the Pathways program a chance first. The CON bill that we've passed has a commission to study expansion of medical services through all types of ways, insurance. Give that a little time. I'm just wondering, I know we ought to have this discussion, but I'm not so sure that it's the time to move forward with until we get some resolution on what's already in play.
But first, I'm sorry to interrupt the lady. Can I first just say that, it's not as if that House Bill 1077, if passed, is going to stop the Pathways program from happening or existing in its current form anyway. I'm so sorry, but we have to talk about how there's this sleight of hand discussion that always happens. Well, if you don't give this an opportunity to see what it can do. Look, did you not hear the woman? She just said, you're not going to even see anything move until October of 2025. There's the time you need, Senator.
That's a really good question. What Peach Care Plus, which is kind of what this bill would name this program, would do is kind of secure the enrollment gains that have been made by Pathways, and it also builds on the success of the Georgia Access Marketplace.
Thank
so
you.
Again, kind of both of the governor's key health policies.
That has had some success, the Georgia Access.
Yes, it's had
program.
incredible success, real enrollment growth over the last couple of years, and that's been very exciting to see. So what this would do is help to draw down some very lucrative federal incentives for the state that go beyond what Pathways is able to do. So regardless of how many folks enroll in the Pathways program, it will always be costlier per person than a program like Peach Care Plus because it pulls down those federal incentives. So Georgia would earn that 90% match. The federal government would pay 90% of the costs, whereas Georgia would pay 10, and we would also earn a 2-year sign-on bonus that, as Senator Lucas referenced, is estimated by the state auditor to be $1.2 billion over the first 2 years of the program.
And by the way, let me also point out that, but back to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Pathways operates under a federal waiver granted on the final days of the Trump administration that's set to expire in 2025. Reading on, some Republicans say it's unlikely to get an extension if President Joe Biden is reelected, since he and other Democrats have pressed states to adopt a broader expansion. Okay, Bennett, back to the Senate Rules Committee.
Questions of committee members. Senator Summers, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you please walk me through how maybe the question should be this right here. The indigent care that we're dealing with in Georgia is massive. Does this take care of that? Can you touch on that?
Yes, so this program would cover, again, kind of based on the state auditor's estimates, somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million Georgians over the first 3 years of the program. Georgia has the third highest uninsured rate in the country, and so this would go a long way in reducing that uninsured rate, making sure providers get paid when those folks seek care, and it really allows those folks who are currently uninsured to take control of their health care, to manage their health care, and make informed choices about getting preventive services, picking up their prescriptions, rather than going to an emergency room, which is kind of their only choice at the moment.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Follow up. If I like that, but are we incentivizing people just to continue to use the system to be indigent care and go to the hospital at 5 o'clock or 5:01 when the doctor's office is closed?
So I think by giving people health coverage, you give them more options, right? So most people don't want to go to the emergency room at 2 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
For real.
They want to go to see a physician that they know and have a relationship with. And so by giving them insurance, you give them that option to do that. When they start getting that tickle in their throat, they go to the doctor first instead of waiting until they have a 100-degree fever and they're at the hospital. So we believe that providing folks with coverage through this program really alleviates that indigent care problem. Certainly, it won't take our uninsured rate down to zero, but it would be a massive reduction in how many uninsured Georgians we have.
Other questions from committee members? Senator Brass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to kind of clarify on a conversation I was having with an unnamed senator whose name may rhyme with
Sitting here at the table.
mucus. That conversation was there was a couple of things I was interested in, and reasons why I was open to looking at this, when in the past I've been against. So some of those are, we do continue to see our rates rise throughout the state for the insured. And then when the insured go into the hospitals and the emergency rooms are stacked up and a lot of that's for reasons that was just discussed.
Yep.
People are going there because they can't be turned away.
Yep.
And so it's not just a problem for uninsured, but it's also we're having problems for the insured. And I do think the Pathways, I think that program has opportunity to work, and I do think it can work. But we're only talking about up to 100% of the poverty level, which I think is, about $15,000 a year. And when we take it to 138, I don't know what that number is, but if I remember in the past, it was maybe around the $24,000 a year. What is it, Madam Leader? You may know better.
I think it's about 31.
Okay, so $31,000 a year, which after the massive inflation we've had over the last several years, that's just that's unlivable. And as a small business owner who can't afford insurance for my employees, and these my guys are hard workers, and there's not always 80 hours in a month for them to work, but they are making more than $15,000, but they may not be making $31,000, and I pay them well, but on an hourly basis, and sometimes roofs leak, sometimes they don't, and so sometimes they're not going to qualify for pathways, and they're certainly not going to qualify based on 100%, but they would on 138. And I do want my guys insured. I do want them to be able to go to get preventative care. So that's what kind of got me finally open to this idea. And
hang on a second. Let's just celebrate the fact that holy cow, we have a Republican, y'all. A rational, reasonable, well-reasoned, thinks it out, and actually sees how it benefits him and his business and his employees. But okay, still a Republican who kind of actually gets it. Hello, Senator Brass. I might be kind of a fan of a Republican senator. Okay, I'll let him finish.
This unnamed senator that rhymes with mucus. One couple things I discussed that I'd like to see in it. It wasn't just the work requirement piece, but there was also a trigger. I wanted a trigger if the federal government ever came in and said we're going to do less than 90%, then the state could back out. And I do see that trigger, I believe, in lines 62 through 64. So I'm glad to see that. As we did discuss, the work requirement it caused issues. I know the Arkansas plan, from my understanding, is every time they applied for the waiver on the workforce requirement, it did not work. They were turned down, is my understanding. But as we discussed, North Carolina, the way they worded it with a workforce development type fund, that did work, and it did pass muster, and it was accepted by, I guess, CMS. And so should this proposed bill get a motion in a second, I would be offering an amendment to add in a workforce development fund that would kind of help alleviate some of my concerns.
All right, yeah, listen, we have to celebrate this, a Republican who actually gets it. It's really sad that we couldn't get this passed yesterday. Back after this. Here we are in the home stretch, final segment of the Ron Show for the day and the week. By the way, you can always listen to this on demand at progressivevoices.com throughout the day. If you don't catch it first, 9 to 10 a.m. at America One Radio, the America One Radio app. I also produce a weekend edition of this show that may not necessarily be the Friday show, but usually is if I don't have enough time. That will air at Progressive Voices when you listen to Progressive Voices via TuneIn. And, of course, I podcast each episode so that you can listen to that on your preferred podcast platform or at ronshowatl.com, where I leave notes, by the way. Hey, I was going to point this out. There was an opinion piece that Bill Torpy wrote, and it talks a little bit about how there is this need for a downtown refresh with the World Cup coming in 2026 in Atlanta. Let me give you a piece of this, and then I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. Bill Torpy writing, a stroll around downtown Atlanta these days can be a very lonely affair. It's almost like tumbleweeds blow across the urban streets. I've heard talk that a few World Cup games coming to Mercedes-Benz Stadium in 2026 will cause the city to spruce up the environment and even push the completion of some projects downtown. On that end, it's good news because it would be great to start completing something. Anything downtown has long been city's laggard. The recent announcement that Atlanta would host 8 World Cup games brought chortles of glee to certain quarters. This will be like hosting 8 Super Bowls. That is the word of Atlanta Sports Council President Dan Corso. A little bit of hyperbole, but okay. I don't blame the fellow for employing overstatement, Torpy writes. It's in the city's DNA. Billy Payne, who was largely responsible for wrangling the 1996 Olympics to the city, liked to call Atlanta's games, quote, the greatest peacetime event in the history of the world. So sometimes puffery has its benefits, he writes. Now, I understand lots of people really like football and that visitors are expected to flock to the games, but let's not kid ourselves. This is in no way the Olympics or even Olympics light. For starters, the federation overseeing the World Cup is spreading around the event like cream cheese on a bagel. 16 cities, 3 North American countries getting its share of the cup. But one hopes a future date, inked in red, a deadline of sorts, will afford the city and developers a smidgen of energy to pump a little life into downtown. Atlanta has always liked to have big events, and we've always been like that, according to former Mayor Shirley Franklin, who, before she was even in office, worked on getting the city ready for the Olympics. I think we'll get dressed up for the World Cup, she said. For a holiday, you don't just cook a big meal, you fix up the front yard and tidy up the bathroom. A walk around downtown on a Thursday at lunchtime showed the area sure needs some TLC, Bill Torpy writes. And then he goes on to talk about the various crevices in downtown, the areas that are in desperate need of some sprucing up and some cleaning, some freshening up. No doubt about it. But can I just tell you, I was myself using rideshare here a while back to go to a conference at the Georgia World Congress Center. And I can't help but notice, as I was talking to other folks who went to this conference, who were staying at like the Hilton or the Marriott, all downtown hotels, the Hyatt, who were just a few blocks away, but the weather wasn't really nice, so they wanted to as well use rideshare. Not all the hotels offer shuttles. There is no one centralized hotel shuttle that connects those hotels to the Georgia World Congress Center or Mercedes-Benz Stadium or State Farm Arena or all three, because those are major venues, right? We are a major convention city, and we don't have major convention conveniences. There's no underground tunnel that, folks could walk through in bad weather that leads you to those venues from the hotels. Obviously, MARTA doesn't do its thing, and we've seen this opposition to streetcar expansion, which obviously the next leg wouldn't address, but holy cow, can we start talking about that? Can we start talking about streetcar expansion? We do have the streetcar that goes right to the Ferris wheel and Centennial Olympic Park, but doesn't take you any further, and actually doesn't go by any of the hotels either. So to me, that is like the third leg. The third leg of the Atlanta streetcar has to be something that connects Atlanta's downtown hotels to those venues. Because, it's less than half of a mile or a quarter or 3/4 of a mile walk. But again, when the weather's not nice, you don't want to do that. So you take rideshare. And if 20,000 people were attending a conference yesterday for black engineers, 20,000 people. And if you divide those 20,000 people and to say, a third, 7,000 per, and you put them all in cars, you're still looking at 7,000 cars trying to pony up all around the same time when a conference started, when a conference ends, to one street in front of the Georgia World Congress Center. Make it make sense. It does not. It feeds you onto a street that runs right in front of the Georgia World Congress Center that is a one-way street that goes behind the Omni Hotel, between CNN Center and the Omni Hotel, and spills out on Marietta, which is just a 4-lane road with a stoplight. You can waste half an hour, 45 minutes. If you are a rideshare driver, it is not worth it for you to take the ride. And don't think Lyft and Uber drivers don't say, I'm not doing that. For that kind of conference, for a Hawks game, a Falcons game, an Atlanta United match, if it's not worth their time to sit idling in a car, expending gas for 30 to 45 minutes for a $7 to $12 fare, we got to work on that. Atlanta, you want to be a major convention city, a major event city? We already are. So can we address the fact that we don't take care of our visitors and provide them the conveniences to get to the things that they came here for from our downtown hotels? Atlanta, are you listening? MARTA, are you listening? Y'all need to work on that. That's going to do it for the Ron Show for the day and for the week. Thank you for listening. Replays 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, and all day on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a great weekend. Back here Monday at 9 a.m. bright and early on America One Radio. Have a good one.